All right, welcome to the debate. We're here to debate that advertisers should not digitally enhance models in commercials, or something close to that. Speeches are 7 minutes long, and we'll have the Prime Minister start us off to open the case for opening government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, this House would not allow advertisers to use digital manipulation on images of models. And we're going to go into a pretty good plan out of this, and then I'm going to talk about two main points. I'm going to go into the impact on men, and I'm going to go into the impact on, you guessed it, women. And then Andrew's going to come on up here, and he's going to talk about the role of advertising in society, and then he's going to be talking about what we should be striving for in terms of our conception of good. So, first of all, the plan. What we believe the problem is that via advertising, men learn to objectify women, and women try to live up to these objectifications. That's the most simplistic way I can look at it. But what we say here is that the reason why advertisers promote that is because it's an image of unnatural beauty. It's something that cannot ever be replicated, no matter how much makeup you put on, no matter how many breast enhancements you have. What we say is that's unnatural. One of the reasons it's so bad is because we believe that advertisers are using this manipulation to try to sell products. And as a result, by trying to sell these products, they are using these unnatural beauty to try to create unattainable realities for the people that will in fact buy them. So what we say here is that the mechanism is that we allow any makeup. Like when a model is getting, posing for a picture, we allow makeup, anything that can happen that makes a model look as best as they can look, we want to allow that. Just after effects, so looking at digital manipulation via computers, whether it be breast enhancement, tummy tucks, smoothing out skin, anything that can be perceived as unnatural, what we say is that that goes against the realm of reality that we're trying to perpetuate here, and so as a result, we do not believe that should be in effect. So my first point here, what is the impact of this type of advertising on men? Men are drawn to these ads simply because of the sex appeal of them. The funny thing is that, it's the more of the promise of future sexuality given you buy this certain product. The funny quote about it is that God gave man both a brain and a penis, but he only gave him enough blood to operate one at a time. The problem is that these advertisers actually go for the nether brain of what I'll call it, as opposed to necessarily the thinking man's brain. And whether advertisers say they're doing that or not, please sit down, sir, they are actually implying this type of future sexuality in their advertisement by purchasing these products. And so what we say here is that this reality is not necessarily going to exist. But the problem is that by men trying to purchase these goods, they are drawn to the impossible. And this impossible is necessarily bad because they believe it is ultimately possible through the promise of this seductive advertising. Go ahead, sir.
Don't you think that makeup perpetuates this same idea of this unobtainable beauty that doesn't actually
Absolutely
exist?
not, because women can wear makeup on dates, and therefore men are going to be more attracted to them. The problem is, women can't bring around their own computer on a string and have them digitally manipulated in front of the man's eyes. That's a big distinction there, and we think that you should listen up a little bit more about it. But what we say here is that we think that it creates this objectification complex, which is one of the main harms of this particular proposal. Because it looks at women as a certain ideal, what women should be on any circumstance, because they view that as kind of the natural reality of the way things are. That if you look at that, and in terms of if men respond to this in the ways that advertisers want them to respond to this, they strive for this type of beauty in their own relationships. They self-select this beauty in their own relationships. And ultimately, the reason why this is harmful is it creates unhealthy relationships because of the unnatural expectations that men are placing on women. It's very similar to pornography in that particular way. But in fact, I would argue that it's actually more misleading. Please sit down. The reason why is that men generally in real life realize that male men don't usually walk on into orgies. Like what we say here is that, the problem is that advertisers make you want to believe that it's possible because they're trying to make the reality possible for each man. So the next thing is looking at the impact on women. And what we say here is that the ideal woman is seen as the motivating factor for every type of product purchase that these advertisers want you to make. And what we see here is that there are obvious social harms of this. Anorexia, bulimia, all of these diseases where women are striving to live up to these standards that are impossible to achieve under the status quo. What we say here is that there are large social harms there because advertisers are taking advantage of personal insecurities in order to sell products. And that's what we believe that the government should step in. Because what we say is by perpetuating this social harm, ultimately, you're going to be causing greater harm to most women. You're going to be causing more eating disorders. You're going to be causing more negative self-images. And we do not necessarily believe that this negative self-image is something that we want to perpetuate in a society where women strive to be equal. What this does is it means that men are, in some cases, seen as the objectifiers that women have to live up to in this particular circumstance. And we say that the problem is that advertising is a gray zone of misleading advertisement. Because it's not necessarily misleading, because they're not telling you that you can buy, a Hummer for $3. But what they are doing is they're misleading you in terms of the opportunity to obtain that reality by purchasing the product that they're advertising. What we say is that the government in the past has taken a stand on this by looking at taking away smoking ads on children's shows, because they recognize that perpetuating these social harms ultimately are more harmful than the type of business that they seek to gain. And what we say here is that the manifestation of this social harm ultimately comes through intergender relations, as I said previously, where women must feel necessarily worthy of a man's respect. What it does is it subconsciously puts a woman at a lower level, and as a result makes it so that under the only circumstance in which they can obtain that particular respect is by purchasing the product. We believe that's fundamentally wrong. And so as a result, because this reality is unobtainable, we cannot necessarily perpetuate this harmful social action. So what have we told you today, Mr. Speaker? We've told you a plan that says that all digital manipulation should be banned on images of models because we believe that it's harmful. And I've given you two reasons, that the impact on men is detrimental and the impact on women is detrimental. The sum of those parts is that ultimately society is harmed by that. And so what we say here is that you must stand in firm proposition of this motion to not use digital manipulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to call to the podium the Leader of the Opposition to open the case for opposition.
Engineers have figured out that. Okay, I think this is a great case. I think it really, in society today, we are bombarded with an unprecedented thing within the last 50 years, right? Today it's digital. Yesterday it was actually the people playing around on the film with pencils and artistic things. Well, the fact of the matter is, we have these high expectations in advertising. But I think here, the fundamental thing is the government should not step in to deal with this, right? And I'm going to talk to you why. But first, I really just want to refute the Gov's point on this, right? And the fact of the matter is, they looked at two main points. They said, look at the impact of men. Men had these undesirable ideas of women, right? They have these ideas that women are that, the prize in the sky, this whole thing that, is unobtainable. And that's the hurt of men. I think there's couple things wrong with this. One is that this is sexist, right? This saying that, look, only men can have ideal ideas of women, right? Women can have ideal of men, right? They talked all this from the male-centric point of view, right? They totally skipped over if we reverse the roles, right? They looked at it as men idealizing women, but what about women idealizing men? I think we're getting totally sexist actual arguments coming out of Science Gov. And I really want to address that in my analysis. But then they also talk about the impact of women. And I think I really just want to go down the flow and kind of counter some of their ideas here. Okay, so the thing is, they say that this is creating this whole, oh, thank you, sir. They're creating this whole ideology of women to be perfect. And they're saying that digital media is the root of all evil. However, if we look through history, right, we've seen that art has perpetuated beauty of women, right? We've seen that photography before that unadulterated perpetuated beauty of women, right? The creating the ideal person, ideal man, ideal woman has always been around, right? And the fact of the matter is, digital media is just a means to do it. And I think that we need to look at this and say, look, by removing the means to do this doesn't remove the idea, doesn't remove the philosophy behind it. You want to say it removes the philosophy? I say the philosophy is ingrained in society, and by doing this, we're not removing the ingraining of this philosophy, and it doesn't solve for anything. Yeah.
I'm sorry. In art, Botticelli's women were fat. They were voluptuous. They were realistic looking. He was part of a school that employed realism.
Okay, then that was the ideal beauty of the time, right? If that was the ideal beauty, the women had to obtain that beauty. If the concept was that, then women were going to strive to be voluptuous in this, and men were going to strive to be whatever the standard paradigm of the time for them was, right? And the fact of the matter is whatever the standard paradigm, people are going to try to become. And digital media just does that, right? So I think that this in and of itself does not solve the problem, right? The problem's always been there, and this is just a means to do it. So I don't think that this really solves the objectification of women or the objectification of men, to be non-sexist on this. So no, thank you. I just want to keep going down here. And they say, look, we need to strive for beauty, and they say, look at the impact of women. People, they starve themselves, they do this, they do that. Right, and this is a problem, right? And men starve themselves to be anorexic. Look at some male models. I'm like Homer Simpson here, right? But there's some male models who are a lot thinner. I'd have to be anorexic myself to do that. So I think the thing is here that this is unobtainable, and that a lot of their rebuttal actually cross-applies to my analysis. So I'm going to go into my extension, or my case right here. And the first thing is, what? This is unconstitutional. This is censorship of the media, right? This is a bad thing. This says that the government says what image can and cannot look like. We're not talking about whether it's just or not. We're saying that the government's overstepping its boundaries on this, right? And we can't, the government is going to now propose an ideal of a woman or a man. Sure, we say the ideal woman looks like this, the ideal man looks like this, but now the government's going to tell us what it is. The government's going to say the ideal woman is average, the ideal man is average, right? We're just changing the paradigm, right? We still have some threshold, we still have some spectrum of what is ideal and what is not, and now we're going to change the ideal to something else, right? And people are going to strive to be that ideal if you really believe what SciGov says. So, I mean, we're just changing the point of reference. We're not getting rid of the ideal, right? The idea of striving to become like something is still there. We just change what part of the spectrum it's on. So I don't think it solves any problems, right? Sure. No, thank you. I think that this too will hurt models, because now digital enhancement does a lot for them not to have to be perfect, right? If they have a little bit of a stomach on a man or a woman, they can tuck it in, they can move it out, whatever they want to do, right? They can change digitally what the person looks like. Now under their system, people have to be perfect, right? People have to be perfectly thin. People have to have the perfect sized body. People have to be strong, muscular. People have to be everything, right? So I mean, now the beauty relies on the person. The people are going to go through hard and arduous processes, straining, deadly, unhealthy processes to do this now. These are huge impacts. Instead of having leeway with digital media and saying, I can have a little extra weight, and they're going to take it away, now they're going to say, look, this is a bad, look, you can't do this. You're going to have to lose it on your own. And that's much more healthy, right? Going through these surgeries is much more healthy than a computer guy going behind a computer and actually playing with it. So, sure. I touched on the sexist part, which I think I want to dig up. It is one of my points here, that this is a sexist argument. I think I covered that well enough. And now I'm going to talk about a counterclaims. So thank you. And the fact is, look, sure, digital media might be straight. Okay, we acknowledge that this is not realism, right? This is something. So what? Let's just put it on the bottom of the thing. There's a Surgeon General of one cigarettes. Let's just make a little thing saying this media has been digitally enhanced. There's a brand name on every picture. Let's just put a little note like DM, digitally mastered, or DI, digitally enhanced, right? You make a little note on the bottom, and people realize, if they didn't realize that this image wasn't digitally enhanced, which a lot of people really can do, wow, someone looks like that, holy, whatever. That's you realize these things, right? And so I think we can understand that it isn't. So if people can't understand this, I moved to have it so that every image is digitally enhanced, whether it be anything in the world, it should just have a little DI on the bottom of it. And that should be, or anything in the United States, just have DI on the bottom of it, and that'll be the solve for this, because I know people are going to realize that's not real, that's digitally enhanced. I should not have ultimately that high of a standard. You disagree.
Okay, but isn't that, first of all, doesn't that concede that there is something wrong with digital enhancement,
no,
that you would need to set it apart?
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just acknowledging that this isn't a real depiction of reality, right? I think we can show, fiction is fiction, right? We can say, a fictionist book is fiction. Should we ban fiction? My God, that book is too fictitious. Right? No, not every book is nonfiction. So not every picture should be nonfiction. Not every picture should be nonfiction, right? I think we should just acknowledge what's fiction versus nonfiction. And I think that if you do that, we're not saying that something's bad or something's good. We're just acknowledging the reality of it and saying this does not accurately depict reality, right? Because I think I want to cap what this goes down to. I think SciGov comes up here and they says, look, men are going to be objectifying women, women are going to hurt themselves for it. But I'm going to say that they hurt themselves more on their side, because on our side, we have digital enhancement. Women don't have to be perfect. They can actually, the models do not have to be perfect. They can actually change their body styles via computer, which does not hurt them, does not cause them to have bad tendencies, right? We tell you that this is a sexist argument to look at only men objectify women, women objectify men, so the debate goes both ways on this. I think we need to point that out here. And Ken would love that. I had to do it for Ken. And I think, we look at this as being unconstitutional. You're limiting free speech. The government's now going to decide what the ideal person is. Because now with this media, goes to a status quo. That status quo is going to be a picture that's shown all over the media. So it's going to eventually come to a new standard. And people are going to strive for that new standard. So why not let it just be as it is, right? Throughout history, we have shown that the various, as God would point out, the various standards for women have changed, right? From being voluptuous to being thin to be X to be Y to be Z. Same with men. So I think we need to look at this and let's say, like, let's acknowledge that it's happening, put a marking on the images to show that it's not a real depiction of reality. I think we get the same benefits, we get none of the negs, and after this, I'm really proud to oppose this resolution.
Thanks much, and I'd like to call to the podium Deputy Prime Minister for 7 minutes.
Here, here.
All right. Well, today, sorry. Start.
I don't even know how to start that.
Secondary source.
I'll give you signals, dude, if you want.
All right, I got it right here.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Well, so today for you, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to present you with my 2 individual points, which are going to be the ideas of the role of advertisement, and secondly, kind of the conception of good in our society. But before I get into my constructive points, I really do have to go into rebuttal, seeing that opposition was even presented this idea of a counter plan. So let's just dive into rebuttal first. So first, what the first op came up and talked about was this kind of sexist ideal, which they think is engraved in this proposition. We think that this is completely false. He brought up the point about how we're only talking about women, of men objectifying women, and women living up to that standard. This does go both ways. However, we see that its most significant and the largest impact is when women objectify men. Yes, we're also saying that men can't make they can't digitally enhance the muscles of men or make the crease on their pants any larger. We're saying that they can't do that either, but we're saying that in general, the largest harm is through men objectifying women. We don't think this is sexist, we think this is reality. Furthermore, what opposition talked about a bit was this idea of like that the philosophy is already ingrained in our society, and the problem here is that yes, to an element, the objectification of women is ingrained in our society, and women trying to live up to this standards that exists. However, the main problem here, which we as the government are trying to deal with, is when that's used to sell a product. And that's when taking that objectification and using it to sell a product is when the government needs to come in and regulate it. And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit more in my individual points. But more so on this issue, we feel that in the past, government has kind of gone in and regulated things that are still ingrained in society. Like, let's take a look. There's still racism in American society. However, through government actions, that racism has been significantly decreased over the past half century. So although some objectification may exist in the future, this is not a reason for the government and for our mechanism to go into motion and limit this. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is this idea of a counter plan. That maybe we should just put a DI in the corner of a picture. Okay, now, Mr. Speaker, when I'm flipping through a magazine and I see a woman in a bikini with big boobs holding a Keystone Light, I love Keystone, and sipping it, that's the first thing I see. I'm not scanning the corner of the page for the DI. I'm scanning the front of her body. That's the entire idea of sex appeal, and something we're going to talk about a bit more in the role of advertisement. So what we see is this entire idea of placing a little label doesn't solve the issue at all. It keeps a problem by admitting that it essentially admits the problem. And what we see here is that it becomes, what we're trying to stop is when this objectification is used to sell a product. So let's move in to my constructive points, and I'm going to show directly how there is this societal harm. So first, talking about the role of advertisement. As I mentioned before, thank you. As I mentioned before, sex appeal is a very effective strategic tactic in advertising. We're not trying to completely limit that at all. That's something that advertisers have used for years, and I'll take you in a second, and it's effective. It's effective for me, it's effective for all of us. What do you got to say about that?
So you're saying you're not trying to limit them so they just can't be too sexy? And then plus, why are you trying to ruin this if you're still going to allow it to perpetuate us objectifying women in society? Because this is not going to solve it.
All right, well, the issue here on that point is that when I'm looking at an image, and it's a woman whose breasts have been digitally enhanced to be bigger, her waist has been digitally enhanced to be smaller, or her face has been digitally enhanced to be more attractive. It's creating an unrealistic image. However, when I'm looking at that picture, all I see is reality, and all I see is that's what every girl I get with should look like. Although that's not reality. This is a disconnect. This disconnect is very harmful in society because it creates these societal beliefs that this is what a woman should look like, that this is what a man should look like. And when this image, when this ideal does not reflect reality, when there is this disconnect, we feel that this reflects in a larger harm. But let's get back to my point on the role of advertisement. Now what we say is, okay, sex appeal is a strategic tactic, but what the government comes in, and where our mechanism comes in, is when it becomes misleading and misrepresents reality. Because the harm here is that it's essentially brainwashing society. It's brainwashing men into to believe that this is how a woman should look. It's brainwashing women into believe that this is how they should look. Yes, I understand it goes the other way too, but this is what we're going to concentrate on because this is where the greatest societal harm is. So what we see here is that the government regulates industries to protect citizens and to protect these societal harms. My partner talked a bit about the cigarette industry. So what we see is that in the advertising industry, that the government has this prerogative to regulate it, to protect the people, to protect them from having this misrepresentation and being brainwashed into these crazy ideals. So to talk some more about these ideals, I'm going to move into my second point, which is the entire idea of the conception of good. Here what I'm going to be talking about is that the government has a role to prevent kind of the exploitation of men and women. And furthermore on this, that the government has a role to prevent that advertisers aren't taking advantage of this perceived harm. Because we have already identified that the objectification of women is a harm. What we're trying to do is prevent the advertisers from actually taking this and putting it into motion, to making it to sell lipstick, to sell beer, to sell products, because this only expands the issue and makes it larger and larger. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so under your plan, are you preferring that the women actually go under the knife to achieve this reality which you guys set forward? Or are you saying that it is...
Okay, you're out of order. What we see here, Mr. Speaker, is that a woman should not have to look at an image and see an unrealistic digitally enhanced image and believe that's how they should look like. They should see a picture of an actual woman, of reality, and make their ideals of how a woman should look on what reality really is. So what we see here is that society strives to be perfect, right? Except as of now, this perfection is not a representation and not a reflection of reality. Because of this, we see that the government has this inherent interest in the well-being of society. Why? Because the government wants to have a productive society. And what we see is through these brainwashed ideals, these people are going to be less productive, are going to be having lower self-esteem, and furthermore, they're going to have these ideals that are harmful of either objectifying women or living up to this objectification. So because of these reasons that my partner Steve brought up, of the harms brought towards men and women, and to my reasons given about the role of advertisement and the conceptual good of society, we strongly urge for you to vote in favor of proposition.
Thank you very much. Now I'll call to the podium the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Am I still like frame here because I want to...
Yeah, you're fine.
Alright, cool.
I'll just digitally enhance the...
I don't think she needs any.
Oh. How nice. That was nice.
Oh, I think I was listening to you the wrong way. Sorry. I thought you said I think she needs it. Not no, I said you don't. I am so sorry. Can I retract?
You're just letting the birds fly.
Okay.
This is gonna be Kate. Or digitally enhanced.
I really am now.
Aww.
Okay, can you digitally edit that out?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay, here we go. Okay, thank you everyone. I think this is a very interesting debate, and how it's brought to the table so far is totally cool. Alright, so what's been going on here is government and op have, on the top half of our table, been squabbling about sexism or not. You know what I think this is? I think this is more of an anthropocentrism argument. They're saying that models are only human. I mean, people, they use cars, they use food, they use dining room sets, they use place settings, they use this, that, and the other thing. You know what? They're all pretty much digitally enhanced. Have you ever picked up a can of Dinty-Moore and said, holy crap, that looks amazing? And you heat it up and it's basically like dog puke and baby spit. And it's really bad. I mean, they're showing like this beautiful dinner that you can get and you pop a top and throw it in the microwave. And I think you guys have pretty much convoluted the whole idea of what a model is. I'm coming from an art background on this, so I'm pretty much going to structure my speech on the artistic sense of it because it's been touched here and there in the top half of the table and in a few POIs. But I want to go back and I want to rebut a few points about what's been going on before I get into my interesting topic. Okay, so here we go. Everyone's saying that it's unnatural, and we've recognized that it is a level of unnaturalism, but in the counterplan that my partners put up, it says that we are going to recognize this, and apparently no one on top half of the table can spell because digitally enhanced would be D-E. I just wanted to throw that out there. So not only my art major, I'm the spelling master too. So there's dots drops for those. So I mean, if you put a DE on there, I mean, in the status quo, it's recognized that things that are not 100% good need to, or even good in any type of spit, need to be recognized. Cigarettes have a huge Surgeon General's warning on them. They have a whole bunch of different stuff. Surgeon General warning on beer saying pregnant women don't drink this. You know, it could cause problems. So what's to say that things that aren't good and that don't perpetuate a 100% good reality, they don't have some type of labeling system on them. And I think that's why the counterplan offered by my partner is really good. It's feasible. You're not losing jobs. You're not creating this whole other industry. You're just simply adding a little bit of text face onto existing document. And it's really easy to go back into existing things. They're not solving for things that are already out there. They're just saying, in the future, maybe this can be fixed. I'm not making a point. So in the future, things are going to be fixed. But they can't go back and fix what's already been done. They're talking just potential reality rather than what actually can be happening in the status quo. And you disagree.
Okay, but is it going to be the same type of thing as in car advertisements where they put the text as small as possible and people still look at the, oh my god, those are jugs. They're not going to look at the tiny text.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into the semantics of this, but it's been passed that the warnings and the advisements have to be a certain size, and it's acknowledged in the status quo. So I would think obviously and logically it would be extended over into this as well. But and keep moving on. Now people, they're talking about sexism, and they're saying that people look at an image and they say, oh, I need to achieve this. Well, before pictures, before photography, there was art. She brought up Botticelli. You know what? Well, and that was one art movement. So you have another art movement. We have, let's go say, surrealism. So if I look at Pablo Picasso's Dancing Woman and I say, oh my God, that is what is like the jams at the moment. Do I need to go and look like that? Do I need to drop acid or something to achieve this reality that's set forth before me in this, at the time, masked media? I don't think that their idea of achieving this alternate universe, great Scott, Marty, you know, it's it's actually any type of plausible point. So now my partner brought up a really interesting notion of not banning all work sufficient, and that goes back into the whole art thing. Photography is art. It's recognized in many different schools, in many different venues, that it is an art expression. So what they're doing by saying that there is, okay, what?
Okay, the difference is, and what you guys, all your examples have brought up, does not reflect the reality that they are trying to sell things and trying to manipulate a reality so that you purchase items to be that reality.
Okay, but the thing is in the counterplan we're offering a unique solvency, and that the side gov is just saying, this is wrong and we're never going to do it again. But you know what? We're saying that we recognize this type of thing as a form of art, it's a vehicle of art. There are specific schools that just have classes based on the art of photo manipulation. You're completely annihilating an entire job market. So under their plan, they're saying, we're never doing it again. They're losing jobs. Under our plan, we're saying, we're still going to happen. We're going to, in the counter plan, we've stated, it's still going to happen, but we're going to have these notes in it. And so you're not putting people out of work. You're not muting an entire school of voice. You're not saying that your art sucks and you're never going to be able to do it again just because we said that you're damaging people immensely. You know what? There's some pretty screwed up paintings. Marilyn Manson's an artist, but we're not saying you can't do art because it warps other people's sense of reality. So just because someone's perception of reality may be different than the side govs thinks, this is not a fluffy puppy world. Everyone can't have their fluffy puppy. You can have your wiry little dog in the corner that's still well fed, but you know what? At least we recognize the fact that it is a work of fiction, it is a work of art, and in fact, art should be respected, and art is protected under the Constitution. Therefore, my partner's point of unconstitutionality totally holds up. And I think that the lower half of the table has a lot to prove for side gov, saying that there is constitutional, and they're not muting art's voice, and they're not creating this total wash of one artistic market. They have to prove that our counterplan has no unique solvency for what they are trying to do. And for that, I believe Side Op has offered you many, many points that are obvious and logical and reasonable as opposed to what the side gov says is correct.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Now I'll call the member of the government to open the case for the closing gov.
To my 1 point, lies, libel, and truth. Okay, so a little rebuttal. Okay, so the last speaker said there's a level of unnaturalism, but the plan, okay, so they're saying that the solvency for this issue is through this digitally enhanced little symbol that's going to be placed on the side of the magazines. What about little girls who can't even read that look at these photos? What about 12-year-old girls that don't even know about regulations, that if they see maybe a smoking sign, they're not going to even understand the Surgeon General's warning? You think they're going to understand this DI represents digitally enhanced? No. This 12-year-old girl is going to look at that image and say, I wish that was me. And that is what is going to happen. And that's why this digitally enhanced plan is fundamentally not going to work. They also said that that many art movements, no, thank you. They also said that many art movements have these ideals that are placed forward. We need to make a huge distinguish between what is art and what is advertising. An artist is not putting out there our no thank you. An artist, no thank you. An artist is not putting forward his artwork so that people can get conceptions of what it's saying. He's not, no thank you, no thank you. He's not putting it out there so that someone will buy something off of it. He's putting it out there because it's a representation of the world around them, no thank you. That's a completely different than an advertisement, putting something out there with a woman in front of it and saying, please buy me. Right? If you buy this, you will look like me. An artist is not saying that you will be like this if you ascribe to this painting, if you view it. No, thank you. Also, she said that model photography as an art form is going to be annihilated. Wow! We're killing off an entire art field because we want a representation of the reality of what women should look like? That's a pretty fucked up movement if we think about it. If we're so worried about killing on no thank you, if we're so worried about killing off model photography because we're afraid of representing models in the way that they looked, then maybe it's not such a good movement to begin with. No thank you. Now moving on to my point. Lies, libel, and truth. First of all, it's a lie. It's libel. Digital manipulation creates a false reality because it's pushing information that is fundamentally untrue. Models don't really look like that. Their boobs are not that big. And most importantly, their bodies are not that skinny. In journalism, altering any image, cropping it, or flipping it is considered libel. This is the status quo because it changes the fundamental meaning of the image. When you change how a model looks, you are changing what he or she is conveying. You are saying that she looks a certain way, though in fact she does not. Yes?
So you're allowing the government to define what art is, and then therefore you're going to take the government's definition of art and compare this to make this liable. If this art doesn't fit the government's definition of art, I think that's a thing. What is your
We have no definition of what art is. We're just saying that we think the fundamental view that photography is going to be ruined by portraying women the way they are is going to kill the art. That's all we're just saying that's wrong. We're not trying to say what art is. We're just saying that women should be represented accurately. Okay, no thank you. So it's fundamentally portraying women in a way that's incorrect. It's pushing forward a message that is not there. And this is unique to models. This is a phenomenon that is unique to models. Only 90% of images go through the same digital retouching. Also, models have a unique believability. It's so pernicious because unlike models, when you see the advertisement, Red Bull gives you wings, you don't actually believe it's going to give you, it's going to reflect a physical reality. Or like when you see Michael Jordan endorsing a basketball show, no thank you. You don't think that you can actually run that fast. But when you no thank you. But when you see a woman wearing a skinny woman, you believe that you can attain what that looks like. You believe that you can be like that woman.
On that point.
Which is completely more believable than the Michael Jordan wearing sneakers or that Red Bull gives you wings. You believe that physical reality can be attained. It's specific to the modeling industry. No thank you. No thank you. Even if you don't believe that, you individually don't believe it, a 12-year-old will. And this is why we see so much anorexia, because models are believable. We truly believe that they can look that way. First opposition even conceded, no, that models are not a reality in digitally enhanced ads. My third aspect of this argument is that pictures speak louder than words. It is illegal for an advertiser to lie with words, no thank you. It is also illegal for advertisers to claim a product as something when it does not. Why should this be any different for pictures and models? Advertisers pasting a skinny, beautiful girl on dye pills is akin to them saying you can look like this by using this product, and that is fundamentally it's libel, and it exists in the status quo already. When journalism flick pictures or mess with the pictures, it's considered libel. And it's in an even more pernicious way because women believe that they can achieve this level. If we as a, and the first government mentioned this as well, if we as a society value truth, we have to hold our advertisers accountable to that standard. This keeps advertisers from selling us lies. It allows us as a society to maintain a realistic conception of the world. Because when we give up truth, how can we ever tell what's a lie? How can we, as an individual society, be able to be able to distinguish between what's truth and what's a lie when our advertisers are always selling us these things? And I want to again stress the unique believability of a model. When a 12-year-old girl looks through a magazine and sees a girl wearing the same clothes that she might buy, using the same makeup products, sometimes even doing the same poses that she might do herself, she is going to assume that she can attain this level of believability because she herself can see herself in that position one day. It's completely different than any other industry or any other type of advertisement. Modeling is specifically unique because in other advertisements, for example, like Red Bull gives you wings, like I said, you don't actually believe you can get wings. And other forms of advertisements, like advertisements for maybe food or something, you don't actually think you can make that food, right? But what we're talking about is this unique believability that happens, that pictures speak louder than words, which causes girls to be anorexic, and it's uniquely unhealthy.
Thank you very much. Now I'll call to the floor the member of the opposition to open up the case for closing out.
Don't eat magazines, they make you throw up. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with my extension because it pretty much deals with what my rebuttal will too. So we agree with their side. We agree with their side that objectification is a bad thing. We don't think women should be objectified. We, however, disagree with the method that they're going to use to get rid of them. So what do I mean by this? We think that in able to get cultural changes in society, this cultural change in society needs to come from the acknowledgement that objectification is a bad thing. We think that once you take away the choice for the individual male to make We think he no longer is making a moral decision that objectification is bad. We think he will continue to objectify women. We think he needs to make that decision himself. So sort of the example I want to bring up is like, I'm not like a big like Bible belter. It's just the example I came up with. So it's like this Adam and Eve example. So we think that when Adam decides to pluck the tree, the fruit from the tree, we think he's making an immoral choice. He's not making the correct choice. However, we think that once we take the tree away and he decides not to pluck it, he's also not making a moral choice because he's not making a choice at all. We think that these individuals, like individual males, need to make the choice whether or not to objectify women, need to make the choice whether or not they believe they can objectify women, and that's their case. I'll take that.
So we should make murder legal so that people are always making a decision by not committing it, but instead of removing that option entirely.
Okay, we think when there's like tangible harms that this doesn't really apply. We think there are like really certain tangible harms, as in people are dying with murder. We think there aren't like super tangible harms in terms of continuing digital enhancement. Furthermore, we think most people have already made the decision that murder is a bad thing. That's why people don't do it. So to kind of like move on to how this extension is working, because it's kind of confusing. So we think this also applies to making a choice about advertising. In terms of, you need to recognize that you are being tricked to realize that this advertising isn't working. We don't think that by getting rid of advertising, you get rid of the idea that people can be tricked. We think people need to make a choice about whether or not to believe this advertising. We also think this no thank you. We think this can further apply to women not being able to realize that they can obtain these goals. What we really want to stress here is the individual's responsibility to make choices, and furthermore, her option to make choices about what she believes. So we think that, in terms of women needing to conform to this identity, we think it's more important for the woman to realize they don't have to conform to this identity. No, thank you. We think that in all situations, we think beautiful women are still going to continue to exist, and women are always going to want to obtain that sort of ideal. However, we think that once we have to make a choice about whether or not that is the perfect female identity, rather than just taking it away, that's where we get our impact. That's when we believe that we can get some sort of social change where women are no longer objectified, where women have equal standing within this sort of workplace and other areas and venues. Yeah.
Okay. But this type of choice doesn't exist in a bubble, as we're meant to believe about the Adam and Eve example. The problem is, all her girlfriends are doing it too. So there's inherent social pressures placed on trying to buy this product, trying to be that person.
We think it's really important that these individuals overcome that social pressure in terms of learning who they are and learning how to make decisions. We think that's a really important thing. We think that the individual needs to take this strong stance to learn these morals. That's where we think changes in culture come from. We think they need to come from this. We think when they come from this top-down sort of movement that we don't actually get the effects we want. For example, the Civil Rights Movement. We think for the Civil Rights Movement to be successful, people had to first realize that blacks weren't inferior before laws could be passed. And that's the same sort of concept here. We think that people need to realize that women shouldn't be objectified before we can pass laws against the objectification of women. No, thank you.
On that.
No, thank you. So now kind of moving in, I have a second point of extension, and that is this idea that we don't want to appeal to token symbols, which we think this is. We don't think this actually achieves any sort of equality. We think that once we start going towards this motion, it becomes the central theme of trying to stop objectification or stop advertising or things like that. We think that when we start to do that, it becomes that when we start to appeal to these symbols, we stop getting actual change. So an example of this. So in lots of places such as Turkey, we have the banning of the hijab. And we see that the hijab then becomes a central theme in terms of turning it into the equality, in justifying equality for women. We, however, don't think that the hijab actually has anything to do with the equality of women, yet the debate is focused on that. We don't want to focus the debate on that. We want to focus it on issues that actually matter to establishing equality. So now to move into some sort of rebuttal, especially of the extension that just got brought up, which we need to find.
Sir.
No, thank you. So their extension was this idea that digital manipulation creates lies. However, we think that these lies are sometimes necessary for people to realize that they have the choice. We think this choice needs to be made. We think this needs to be like, people need to choose whether or not they're going to objectify someone before it can actually be moral responsible. So that's like a basic sum up to that sort of point. So now to move on to some of like the first half rebuttal. No, thank you. Okay, so the first point you brought up was like this impact of men. And I think by extension deals with this. We think men need to change because of, like they say, men are just drawn to because of sex appeal. We think men need to realize that they're being drawn because of sex appeal, and therefore need to change that rather than taking away the choice. Furthermore, we think this extends to women in terms of women choosing to be anorexic or something like that. They need to realize this ideal feminine body is an actual reality. So for all these reasons, we're very proud to propose.
It's okay, I forget something too.
All right, thank you very much for that. Now I'd like to call the podium the government whip to conclude the debate for the government.
I know, but I just heard it.
You can do it.
Alright, please, everyone present. Beyond the specificity of the motion, what we're talking about here is truth. What makes digital manipulation specifically bad? Is truth a fungible value, one that we can trade away? And what happens to a society when it does trade away this value? But these are the questions that I think we need to ask to resolve this debate. Before I get into that, I'm going to address the new point that was brought up over here, completely knock it off the table, and then go on with my own. So, I call this the Clockwork Orange argument, and that we should have a government that we need to enable people to make bad decisions so that we can congratulate them for making good decisions. I've got 3 problems with this. The first one is, as he conceded in my point, the presence of tangible harms negates this idea. And I think that anorexia, the stilted expectations of women, low self-esteem, depression, and death of young girls are pretty freaking substantial and tangible. So that goes out even if we would like this philosophically. But I'll go on. So what is the place of a government in a society?
Out of order, out of order, out of order, out of order.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry for being interrupted by you. Do we want a government that incentivizes and encourages good behavior while limiting bad behavior? Or do we want a government that judges us, tests us, and then knowingly smiles down on us or frowns when we make bad decisions? That's not just impractical, it's paternalistic, and I don't think that that's the role of government. We want a government that encourages progress and encourages good ideas. That's why we're debating here, to encourage these good ideas. So I think that if you're going to create a society where your goal is to test people and allow them to make bad decisions just so that you can pat them on the back when they don't objectify a woman, is fundamentally flawed. And finally, his example of the hijab, as my partner was certainly about to say, in Turkey is not about concern for women, but about a military government trying to maintain secularity. So this completely goes out the window. So I'm going to talk about the 2 big things they accuse of. First of all, we're sexist. They say that we've cared about women too much. We've addressed the concerns of women too much. But we say that if you don't specifically address the concerns of an oppressed group, you tend to overlook them. And then this young lady here said that we're too human-centric. Yes, we are. We care about people. We don't care about teapots because teapots don't starve themselves to look like the skinny teapots on TV. So we think that this is a good thing. So I'm going to go on to my 3 main questions. First of all, is this manipulation lying? And we provided 2 criteria for why digital manipulation is uniquely bad and uniquely lying. The first one that the first government provided is this idea of accessibility. First government set up a standard that said digital manipulation is, unlike physical changes or unlike makeup, non-replicatable. No matter what you do to your body, you can never physically elongate your neck or elongate the photons that it produces the way that you can do in a digital manipulation. So it goes further than other forms of appearance manipulation. The second criterion, which my partner set up, is this issue of believability. And they say all ads are sexy and all ads imply false claims, but digital manipulation changes the physical reality. People reading magazines are more likely to believe that a model actually looks like that than they are to believe any other form of advertising. And this also completely wipes away their entire argument out of art because unlike Picasso's art, it's not believable. You don't believe that this reflects physical reality. With models you do. So it's uniquely pernicious, widespread, believable, and that constitutes a major lie. Yes, sir?
Sir, but you're assuming that this unnatural like these unnatural images can come about only through digital manipulation. I mean, if you look at it, supermodels existed pre-digital manipulation, right? There are women who did things to bodies that are unnatural.
Let me
So
respond to
solve
this.
the problem.
This is your argument that we don't go far enough. And so we're going to go on to my next point, which is the question of should a society uphold truth? And they agree with us. They agree with us so much they wish we would do more. They said that we should set aside digital manipulation by putting on a little DM, which means that one, they argue that government has a right to restrict this kind of thing in some way, and that they have a duty to. Where we disagree is that they don't go as far as solving the problem that we do. And so at this point, when the difference between two proposals that recognize their problem, one of them wipes away that problem, and one of them makes a small token effort to minimize it, then the choice here is clear. They also say that so should society uphold truth? I believe we agree we should, and the best way to do it is by going with our plan instead of going with their token plan. Then they say that we should sacrifice it because it will prevent women from getting surgery, but they already do this even when they're getting digitally manipulated. The thing here is that the image of beauty is a rubber band. You stretch, when you have to stretch it further than it actually turns out. So the further away that we make this standard of beauty, the more that women are going to get surgery to try and attain it. If we scale it back, then we're going to see people scaling back their efforts. So the third point here is what happens when we allow our society to trade away the value of truth. And this is where we get into the insightful analysis of the first government. First of all, it damages relationships by getting men to commit to an unrealistic expectation of women. It creates an overall sexist society where women are held to a far higher standard than men are. And three, eating disorders. This was the elephant in the room that really didn't get talked enough about at the top of the table, but my partner tried to bring it into her narrative. And it's not because they're bad people, it's because they had a lot of really interesting things to say. But we believe that this is the biggest impact. Young women acting on information they believe to be true, as we've established with the specific believability of models, are making, in reality, a rational decision. It would be a rational decision to try and imitate this simply because if that image was true. The problem here is that the image is false, and that's the problem of the lie. You get people acting on bad information, and they therefore make bad decisions. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, can you please outline your unique solvency that goes above and beyond the fact that we're acknowledging what's going on in these pictures?
Okay, first of all, as this young gentleman here pointed out, that having the picture still on the page with a little DM, you're never going to notice that. If we agree that it's harmful to have these pictures in society, then why don't we remove these pictures from society instead of giving them a little DM? So that's what makes our plan pretty uniquely solvable. And then they say, this is where it gets down to the on balance. What happens when we allow untruth in our society? We see women making poor decisions. We see men making poor decisions. We see everybody making poor decisions. Truth is the core and the background. And the only thing that they have on their side is that we should continue to do this to save jobs. That these people, these poor Photoshoppers, won't be able to find work elsewhere. Well, I'll tell you what. I believe that the value of truth is too high to be weighed against something as petty as this, and as we said, they can always get jobs digitally manipulating teapots. So if we're too human-centric, let it be so. Vote for the government. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and I'd like to call the opposition whip to the floor to conclude the debate.
You might want to turn that one off.
So, I actually tried a few times throughout this case to take a few POIs, and that's okay. That's all right, because I'm not going to take any of yours. So now that that's covered, let's kind of just jump into the debate, because I had some things to say, people. All right? I think that we've all agreed here that objectification is bad. I'm going to go and support the extension and the opposition's case. I'm going to just tear you guys down a little bit, and I'm going to try to bring everything else that was in the clouds back down to some real black and white, and we can actually see what the case is. So I guess my first question is that if you believe on the government side that people are smart enough to think that Red Bull, it doesn't give you wings, obviously, but yet at the same time, then I guess I believe that I can date Pamela Anderson because I look at magazines. All right, cool. So I guess what I'm saying is that they really not only undermine the value of women
in their justification and their arguments, but they actually at the beginning of the table, it was like, I must be led around screaming blind with my penis just telling me where to go. All right? The opposition side really would have you believe that because we see beautiful women in these pictures, I will not date a lesser looking woman. I'm going to tell you right now, Mr. Speaker, that I'm kind of funny looking, and the woman I date is not going to be a supermodel. All right? I think that there is, we talk about truth, and I think that we are ignoring the concept of reality. So putting that, no, I told you guys. So with that being said, we're going to kind of go into this idea of back into objectification to kind of strengthen the extension, which was not only wonderfully unique and strong on the second opposition side, but to kind of go into the excellent arguments on the opposition table. So we talked about how we both disagree that objectification of women is bad. What I tried like 12 times to get up and stand on our POI is, this is putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, Mr. Speaker. All right, this is already heavily perpetuated throughout society. Okay, Tina, the 12-year-old, is shocked when she sees the magazine, so she goes into the bathroom and throws up until she dies. But at the same time, she goes out to the movies and sees Hollywood, where all these actors are not in the magazine, they're in real life, and they're living, and they are popular culture. And that gets to the side of the opposition table. No, thank you. No, thank you. We get into this idea of what is popular culture. All right. Magnificent point on the first side of the table was, this is just the current paradigm, all right? Women were voluptuous at one time, and that was good. It was like,
Order, please.
And that was what was considered attractive, all right? Now, I guess by their standards, although they have currently not seen any magazine where their favorite larger woman, or different ethnicities, or people doing weird, crazy stuff that you can't buy at the regular store. What I'm saying is that there's not only a huge and diverse culture, but just because that's the paradigm of the time does not mean on the government side that you should try to break it down. I have a lot to cover, gentlemen. All right. So we both agree that objectification is bad. He gave an excellent example on the second half of the table about how Adam should at least have the choice to pick that apple, whether or not it's good, all right? So he kind of talked about that, and he said that, in order to achieve actual morality, the choice has to be there. No, thank you. By telling us what, that this should be normal, that's fine. All right, I guess they're also completely underlying, DM, IM, AIM, whatever you want to call it. The thing is that on the opposition's counterplan, they're talking about something that says, yes, these women aren't real. If you're telling me that I'm not going to look at this tiny little symbol, then I also don't see that, that lung that's screaming an explosion every time I buy a pack of cigarettes. Mr. Speaker, what we're not understanding in the very underlying concept of this debate is, I still buy those cigarettes, and I still look at those magazines because there's popular demand for it, Mr. Speaker. It's not some addictive substance that we can't get away from. People actually want this stuff, Mr. Speaker. All right, so we talked about this idea, and then on the second half of the government side, we talk about stealing truth. All right, okay. So we're taking away truth from our societies, Mr. Speaker. On the opposition side, we would say that we get to make our own truth. Okay? It depends, whether you have the idea of surrealism or the idea of, no, thank you.
Order, please.
Well, the idea of surrealism, all right, she's got, we, on one side we have, it's okay if we destroy an entire school of thought and destroy a few jobs. On the other side, we're going to say that depending on the art, you can depict whatever you want. In our society at these times, we're going to say, yes, we like thin, beautiful women. All right, again, they come back with this idea of real tangible harms. But in a cost-benefit analysis, we're going to say three main questions. That is, as soon as I find it, does this create the answer you're looking for? All right, to kind of bring this back into scope. No, thank you. No, thank you. Does this create what you're looking for? We're going to say no. We demonstrated this because we're going to say that it's not only continually perpetuated throughout society, Mr. Speaker, the teen, the 12-year-old, is going to see this somewhere else, all right? And there's not a direct correlation, even though there are, cases, because I don't throw up just because I look at a magazine like we were joking over there. No, thank you. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I'm not saying that this is the sole reason for all your problems. Maybe you should look at the other side of the fence, which is maybe they should look at their eating habits, of commodification of food and other things in society, because that's not the magazine's fault, and it's especially not the digital imaging, all right? Second of all, we talk about, this is to dismantle the image of this perfect body. People are still going to be beautiful. This was mentioned on the other side of the table. What this is really going to do is that the people that could have cut it before
on the magazine with a little digital imaging, they're going to get fired and replaced by the people who don't need any digital imaging. People still crave, this perfect quality. They still want beautiful women. The taste right now, whether it's driven by the media, it is consumed by popular culture, Mr. Speaker, and they want thin, beautiful women. All right. So we talked about this idea of objectification. We talked about how we're allowed to. No, thank you. Sorry, guys. We talked about how we should be able to check our reality, and they only come at us with this idea of truth and these real harms. The opposition shows you that these harms are still going to be here, Mr. Speaker. All right. But this is the popular paradigm at the time. All right. People want this. It's still going to exist. This is not solving real issues like equality of women. Again, you're sucking the air out of the room. You're taking this and making it a token issue, Mr. Speaker, when you should be looking at real things like maybe like income or something like that. But you're not, Mr. Speaker. You're getting caught up on one issue. And instead, what you're doing is you're taking an art form, you're taking people, you're taking the industry, and you're making them the scapegoats for something else, which is a bigger issue, Mr. Speaker. The opposition side would have you look beyond that. They gave you a counterplan that works. It gives them, some of the things that they want with some of the negative things with government censorship. And it's for these reasons we proudly oppose, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you very much. Across the aisle, shake hands.